Hello, everyone. Ricardo Bueno here, diversesolutions.com. And today I'm with the man, the myth, the legend, Matthew Shadbolt, the Director of Interactive Product and Marketing at the Corcoran Group. Matthew, how are you?
Hey, Ricardo. How's it going?
Not too bad. So, for those of us that aren't familiar with who you are and what you do, why don't you give us a little bit of background on sort of where you come from and how you got started at the Corcoran Group?
Yeah, sure. I'm the Director of Interactive Product and Marketing here at the Corcoran Group, which is Manhattan and Brooklyn's largest residential real estate brokerage. We also cover markets out in the east end of Long Island, so the Hamptons, and we have a presence, a smaller presence in the Palm Beach area of South Florida. We have just over 2,000 agents. And last year, 2010, we did $13 billion in sales. I'm basically responsible for the value build of anything digital that touches the customer. So that ranges from building out Corcoran.com, all of the ad partnerships that drive traffic to Corcoran.com, search in all its different forms, paid search, organic search, general search engine optimization training for our agents, that kind of stuff, right through to social, which we've been very focused on over the last 2 years in particular. At the moment, we're focused on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, with some peripheral presence inside of platforms like Tumblr and Foursquare. Mobile, all of Corcoran's mobile initiatives. We have both iPhone and Android apps that fall directly under my group's responsibilities, and also video as well. So we have a very substantial sort of video presence inside of things like YouTube. We do video syndication, things like that. So we do anything and everything in between those fairly wide parameters. And we also do some more sort of experimental, localized types of digital marketing here in New York, ranging from touch screens in the back of taxi cabs right through to interactive billboards in Times Square. So it's a fairly wide spectrum of sort of digital marketing that me and my team are responsible for, but anything digital that touches the customer is usually comes across my desk at some point here.
Needless to say, you're a very, very busy man.
Well, there's some days it feels like that, and most days it doesn't, because honestly, we're so into it and we're having such a lot of fun doing
awesome.
what we're doing that many days it doesn't even feel like work. So
that's awesome.
I know what you mean, but it's not quite true.
That's awesome. That's exactly what you want. So let's kind of go back. You mentioned that social has kind of become a big field for you all. At what point, and then how do you balance the activities that you're doing across different platforms? How do you determine, hey, let's get into this because it's profitable, or it's a potentially a good venue for us to communicate with our clients in the digital space? How do you make those decisions when you were first getting started in social to where you are now?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. And one of the surprising things that we always tell people is that we actually didn't start with Facebook. The first social media platform that we decided to embrace, if you like, was Twitter. And
Interesting.
For us, it always comes down to our brand premise, basically, which is sort of predicated on this idea that when you look for an apartment or a place to live in New York City, the choices that you make are just as much about what is around that building as what's inside the apartment itself. So internally, we call this process going beyond the four walls, because there's so much commoditization of just listings that has happened anyway, that you can really get listings in so many different places. And even though we're not members of an MLS, for example, here in New York, there's so many different venues, from Zillow to Trulia to more localized things like the New York Times and StreetEasy that we have here, that the point of differentiation about really trying to answer the question, what does it feel like to live in that particular spot, is really something that's actually a really great fit for us in social. So we always start with that idea and choose platforms that solve problems that answer that particular kind of marketing question. So for example, like when we chose Twitter, we had a customer service problem with Corcoran.com in that we couldn't talk to people using our own website. So, Twitter is actually a really great sort of open door for customer service online where people could actually talk to Corcoran, the brand, and, ask us anything, something to do with the market, something to do with neighborhoods, something to do with food, anything to do with the lifestyle of living in New York.
Let me ask you this. What were some of the questions that folks were asking and that they continue to ask?
We get a real wide range of stuff. It really ranges from, can you help me find a place to live, which is, at that point it becomes a very concrete sort of lead generation type stuff, right through to, where can I get the best cupcake on the West Side, or where's the best bar in the financial district? I mean, that's one that we got, a couple of days ago, and it's very much something where we've really been able to own expertise about life in the city. I'm a firm believer that nobody really knows this better than agents. So if what we're trying to do is really extract all of that information out of our 2,000 agents' heads and leverage that so that people understand that you can get an answer from Corcoran in a way that you might not be able to elsewhere online. So that's really sort of our perspective. And then once we started to sort of grow our Twitter presence, what we actually found was that we were sort of curating and sharing all this great information about the city, but it wasn't very visual. Twitter sort of primarily text experience. So what we ended up wanting to do was share much more visual things. Like we wanted to sort of tweet about let's say a cupcake or the best slice of pizza or something, but we actually wanted to show that as well. And that's really became the genesis of what we ended up doing on Facebook. It became a best of Twitter. So it became like videos and photo galleries and
an extension of what you were already doing.
It was sort of like a best of version of what we were already doing. And many of the newer platforms that we pick are very much driven by that kind of idea. Like we've just started a relatively new presence on Google+, and it's highly informed by that same kind of evolution process.
So in many ways, it sounds like what you were doing or what you are doing is selling. It's kind of this idea of selling the community before you sell the house, where you're establishing yourself as a go-to expert or as a local expert on everything local, not just real estate.
Yeah,
but everything having to do with the community.
Yeah, I mean, community is always a kind of odd word, and obviously we have to do everything that we do online within certain guidelines established for us by like fair housing laws and things like that. So the word community, it can be a little bit thorny. What we actually do is sort of tap into communities that already exist rather than create communities around a product. We find that sort of just appealing to certain types of people in certain types of ways. For example, like we may do something on a Thursday that appeals to sports fans. We might do something on Friday that appeals to foodies, or we might do something on Saturday that appeals to people that just really love stories about New Yorkers, or on that kind of personal level.
It almost sounds like you're adding a theme to the content that you share. Does that help with the creation process as far as what you do? Share?
It certainly helps when you get stuck for something to post. That's for sure. We certainly have a set of go-to resources for what to post, although we have no schedule. There's no set schedule, and I'm sort of passionately against this idea of pre-scheduled posts.
Really?
In Facebook or Twitter. I actually really enjoy the fact that I don't really know what I'm going to post on the page when I get up in the morning. I think the ability to be more reactive and I guess maybe even impulsive is the word,
Right.
based on what's going on right now, I think is really important for something like Twitter and Facebook. It feels more authentic and it feels more
Right.
real time. I think if you're a heavy user of those platforms, I think you can tell when things are pre-scheduled, and I think that
Right.
you start to erode your own authenticity when you do that.
The
So
quality of your interactions.
yeah, absolutely, and I think when we're posting, for example, we're in the room. We're in the room. If we put something out on Twitter, that means we are available for a response. And I think the idea of sort of pre-scheduling things goes against that. So, last night, for example, I went to see the Rangers play the Maple Leafs at Madison Square Garden, and we ended up making today's photo gallery posted up on Facebook as a result of that. So, we share these great sort of panoramic shots that we took inside of
Right.
the arena, and close-ups of the players, and it really gives us sort of like a tiny little insight into
That's awesome.
something that's quite special about being in New York. So we had never done
Right.
that before. So every day we're doing something new, and we don't necessarily create all of our posts ourselves. It's probably, I would say it's an 80-20 split between 80% curated and 20% created. But it serves us well, that kind of balance.
When you talk about that 80-20 split between what you curate and what you generate on your own, can you give me a few sort of basic examples or a few small examples?
Of both?
Of the content that you curate. So what kind of content are you curating that you're sharing, and then what kind of content are you, like last night's example?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we might curate, for example, is if there's like a group of things assembled on like a restaurant site, like a food site in the city. We have many of them here in New York, and they're always coming out with their picks for the season, or their picks for a neighborhood, or where to get the best pizza slice, where to get the best cupcakes, where to get the best cocktails, all of those things. And that actually serves us very well, because it taps into the spirit of a neighborhood in a way that's curated by experts at that, and we're able to share that. And so people sort of see that great content through the lens of Corcoran via Facebook and us sharing it. But
Right.
we don't have to actually go out and make that. On the other side, in the creation space, for example, like we do a lot of work on YouTube, where we'll actually recycle stuff that's coming out of Twitter. Like somebody will ask us something on Twitter. What we'll actually do is create a sort of highly differentiated archive of answers to those questions in video form.
Right.
This is something that's somewhat unique with our video approach, that we don't really do home tours and neighborhood bios and things like that. We have a huge inventory of hundreds of different answers to questions. And it might be, can I bring my pet into a rental? What's the difference between a condo and a co-op? What paperwork do I need if I'm moving to New York? Things like that, very sort of common questions.
Now, I've seen some of those videos. Let's talk about those for a second,
Sure.
because it looks like you do have this tremendous archive of videos that answer very basic questions to more complex questions. You've also made them fun by taking some of your agents and some of the members of your staff and asking them, what's a typical New York Friday for you? And you've made it fun. You've made it interactive. How long since you started doing that? Was it something that you guys sort of did from the very beginning, or?
Yeah, it's actually they tended to be in 6-month cycles for us. We first started with Twitter, and then 6 months after that, we started with Facebook, and then we were highly disappointed with Facebook's video offering. Certainly in terms of being able to sort of find and classify things and sort of organize content around that. Plus, we were getting asked all these questions inside of Facebook and Twitter, and that became our sort of impetus to start YouTube. So I would say we've been doing it for probably about 18 months to a year, 18 months to 2 years, something like that for YouTube. We have just over 200 different videos, and of those 200 videos, we have about 250,000 views. So each one of them gets viewed, a lot, which is great for us to see. And we use a lot of data to coach the people that we film to maximize the viewership. So we're big believers in things like YouTube Insights and being able to coach people for future sessions based on the data that we see of our current inventory of clips.
So 2 questions for you there. The first question being, how did you decide what content you were going to post and answer in those videos? And then the second question being, how are you using those insights? I know YouTube, for example, and I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but they do give you some statistics as far as the percentage of people that are viewing on, say, a mobile device versus the web. What did you sort of determine and do with those sorts of insights?
Well, let me answer the first one, which is how did we decide what we're going to do? I think in general, real estate video, it really falls into 2 categories. I think you get the kind of graceful panoramic slideshow that isn't really video. It's really just sort of moving photos. That's usually set to some sort of beautiful piece of classical music with a call to action at the end. Or it falls into the, I guess what you would call the sort of Blair Witch type approach, where you have the agent with the flip cam, opening closet doors and sort of doing
breathing heavy as they go up the stairs.
Breathing heavily into a darkened room. And we didn't really want to do anything like that. I mean, we were very keen on creating a differentiated product. And of course, home tours and things like that is something that we do here as a matter of course at Corcoran, but it really wasn't going to be our play for how we built a channel. So for us, YouTube was it's really more of an extension of other things that we were doing in social, as opposed to the usual approach that you see with real estate video, where it's an extension of listings and search. So that's sort of the differentiation for us, is that it isn't really focused on homes. It's more focused on the stuff that we were seeing in social, which is, insightful, helpful, fun advice. And as a result, we're sort of fairly unique in that approach, which has served us very, very well. Plus, it's core to our brand premise. So that's sort of why we ended up choosing it the way that we did. But in terms of the actual data insights, you mentioned that, like, how many times these things are viewed on devices outside of the desktop. That's been an amazing thing for us to see, because we're seeing really, really strong viewership inside of mobile, certainly in terms of how long people actually stay and watch the clip.
Interesting.
Which is a really key metric for us. People watch longer on the phone than they do on the desktop for our particular content. So we're using those kind of insights, and we've built that video content back into our iPhone and Android apps. So if you are...
When did you launch those? At what point did you decide mobile was something that you needed to obviously pursue?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have to think back a little bit there, but it seems like a long time. But I think I would say in the fall of 2008, we decided that really the future of the web was going to be less and less about desktop computers and more to do with smartphones and tablets. And this is before before the iPad had come out or anything like that. Android was very much in its infancy, and there wasn't really as strong a culture of apps as there is now. But we understood and felt very strongly that our future was probably going to be more literally in the location business as it relates to GPS on your smartphone than being sat in front of a screen clicking a mouse. So it took us, I would say, about 10 months to go through the product development cycle of building an iPhone app. And in October 2009, we launched that. And that was really our first entrance into doing anything significant with mobile.
Right.
We launched a very large set of in-app advertising programs to coincide with that were focused on driving downloads of the app. So we advertised inside of the New York Times app or the Wall Street Journal app, the New York Post app, things like that to actually drive visibility, awareness, and downloads of our own app.
And where can we see? We can access your mobile app via your website?
Yeah, you can go to corcoran.com/iPhone, or you could just do a search for Corcoran in the App Store.
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the more, let's say, mobile-based initiatives, because you played a little bit. We talked about Twitter, we talked about Facebook, and some of the video content that you were creating. At what point did you get into using things like Foursquare and really sort of building a presence around some of the different things that you were doing and the content that you were creating?
Well, for us, our Foursquare presence, it really started with Dennis Crowley's keynote at Real Estate Connect in January 2010. He's the founder of Foursquare, and he came and spoke to this, real estate audience about the power of using your phone to explore cities, discover new places to go, and how to sort of unlock your city. That's the phrase that they actually use, is Foursquare is a tool for unlocking your city. And, I was sat in the audience and I thought, what he's talking about is very much what we talk about. It's how to share local insight, how to find new places to go, how to, really make the city sort of exciting and new and fresh. And, we're very spoiled for that in New York anyway. So we have no shortage of sort of things that we could do. Plus, Foursquare is from New York, and we're very passionate supporters of that kind of startup.
Instant connection.
Yeah, and we thought, those guys, they really seem to, their why, if you like, is very much our why as well. So I began to explore the idea of, ramping up some kind of presence within Foursquare, and we decided that we didn't really want to do anything to do with the game of Foursquare. So it wasn't really of interest for Corcoran to be the mayor of something, or for Corcoran to earn, particular badges, or even to have our own badge.
Which interestingly enough, is the reason a lot of people would engage in Foursquare. Would you say that's accurate? For a lot of people, it's the game.
I think it was accurate. I think less so nowadays. I think they've really moved towards more the couponing and discounted, value-driven type of service, where they're trying to get people to come back to certain venues and really encourage loyalty for venues. I think they've become much more about that than points, badges, mayorships, and all the rest of it. So I think it's less competitive than it actually was. I think they've moved very significantly away from the game mechanics of it. But 2 years ago, that was still very, very strong. So what we decided, we were seeing all this stuff happen inside of Twitter and YouTube and Facebook. But what Foursquare allowed us to do was put all of that information in the right person's hand, in the right place, at the right time, on their phone. So what Foursquare does for us, it's like our truly mobile social platform, because it allows us to do everything that we're already doing elsewhere, and empty that inventory of information into something that's truly location-based. So for us, what it ended up being was the creation of a huge inventory of what we call venue tips. So when you check into somewhere, like the Shake Shack or something, you'll get a tip of something unique to do that only a real local would know from Corcoran. And that's actually been very, very powerful as Foursquare has grown and evolved, we've actually been able to sort of grow and evolve our presence around that theme as well. So as they add services to their own platform, like they added photos to tips, so
right.
then we could add photos to tips. And then as they added more tools for exploring and discovering new places, what actually surfaces in guiding you to those recommendations is the tips. This is a popular tip
right.
in this particular area, but it's brought to you by Corcoran. So people start to have the ability to explore and discover new places, even if they don't follow us. They still see our tips. So that's been really, really huge for us.
Talk about being everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it really allows us to very much own the city from a mobile perspective. And what we see in general, we're big believers, because we see it firsthand, is that we really believe this idea of Zuckerberg's law, that every year on year, people double the amount of information that they're sharing, and we're actually seeing that directly reflected inside of our social media platform growth. Like, we're seeing Facebook for us double year on year, and also Twitter, and also YouTube. We're seeing YouTube like triple from the subscriber rate, for example,
That's
year
awesome.
on year. But for Foursquare, we're seeing a six-fold increase. Like,
no way.
It's really, we're 6 times bigger now than we were a year ago on Foursquare.
That's awesome.
As a direct result of embracing the platform at the right time, and as they've grown, so have we. So we're very, very happy and with that particular set of results, and it's been amazing for us.
Now, let me ask you this: what kind of conversations do each of these platforms generate, or what kind of conversations are you hoping that they generate with the individuals that you're connecting with? I mean, I would think it's to generate conversations about real estate, or create that opportunity to have conversations about real estate, right?
Ultimately, yes. But that's not really where it originates. It varies, honestly. I mean, we see a lot more B2B type conversations inside of Twitter, for example. Twitter, even though it's been the most successful platform for us in terms of generating actual business, we see a lot more B2B type conversations from our presence there. Facebook, for example, is a lot more conversations about what to do around town, and then it sort of leads off from there. Foursquare, there's no ability to have a conversation with the people that follow you. So what happens is a lot of the conversations that we would have in Foursquare ultimately surface inside of Twitter instead. So a lot of people will talk to us about things that they saw, or thank us for a great tip that they did inside of Foursquare, but they'll do it on Twitter.
Right.
And then YouTube, for example, there's 2 things. People vote, so we get a good sense of how helpful something might be, and they also let us know by how long they watch, which is always a good metric for somebody that's creating sort of TV content, if you like. And then the conversations inside of YouTube for us tend to be a little bit more private, I guess. They tend to be more individual messaging back and forth, rather than a comment posted to the channel or to a video, for example. So it varies, and we're seeing minimal overlap between those platforms. Like the people that we speak to on Facebook, we don't really. It's a different set of people on Twitter, and then it's a different set of people again on Facebook or on Google+. Like Google+. So
you don't necessarily worry about cross-posting?
We very rarely cross-post, actually. Very rarely. We recycle content between the platforms, but it's never that we'll sort of blast one thing out simultaneously across them all. We very rarely do that. And very deliberately so as well. We try to tailor those things as much as possible for the platform. Right.
And your mobile, how has it evolved since you launched your mobile initiative?
I mean, based on our apps, for example,
Right.
we're um, we're small in terms of our app download presence. I mean, for us, we're very very happy with the numbers that we have, but we're no Zillow or Trulia or we never rank in those kind of categories because we do
Right.
a very very different thing, and our even our inventory is just a fraction of what those syndicators offer, and we actually carry our content inside of both of those apps anyway because we syndicate to them. But um, one of the really interesting things that we always um, try to share when we talk about our apps is that our app users they're kind of like our power users, if you like.
Right.
On average, they stay 6 to 7 times longer inside of our iPhone app than they do on Corcoran.com on the desktop, for
Wow.
example, which is like a staggeringly powerful number for us because I never would have foreseen people spending that long inside of the app,
Wow.
which is amazing for us. And we're definitely trying to capitalize on that by making the content richer. So
Right.
putting video content from our YouTube channel inside of the search results. So if you're saying
Right.
like what's available, for open houses near me now, and you do like a GPS search with the app, you'll get localized video banners pop up that says, here's a great place to eat, but here's a local talking about that. So if you're in, the Upper West Side, for example, and you're doing a search, you'll get somebody, that you can watch talking about life on the Upper West Side inside of the search results, and that gets
Right.
recycled over from YouTube. So, or you'll get like banners saying, here are some of Corcoran's most popular Foursquare tips for the Upper West Side, and it'll start to recommend restaurants and places for brunch and places to go shopping and things like that. So we recycle a lot of that stuff back into our mobile apps to make the experience richer and more about what it feels like to live in that particular neighborhood, outside of just pages and pages of search results.
That's actually really really awesome.
Cool. I think so. I mean, I think that kind of stuff goes closer to the experience of really what it feels like to look for a new home.
Right.
I think
It's
a lot of
it's
people
not very in your face, and I think
no,
that's why I
deliberately.
think that's why I say it's awesome. It's because it's not in your face, and it's actually stuff that I really do have interested in knowing about.
Right. It's so genuinely interesting to people. I mean, I think the idea of like searching listings has been solved by many different people. I don't
Right.
think what I think hasn't really been solved yet is not searching listings but finding homes. I think there's a really big difference between those two things. One is database driven and one is not. One is much more about what it feels like to live there. How am I going to fit into this particular kind of area? Is it right for me? And all those kind of questions that you would ask yourself as part of that home purchasing process, that's really difficult to do inside of a syndicator site. So we want to go more towards that finding homes process than searching
Right.
listings.
So let's say I'm a new agent. I'm hungry to close some escrows, right? Because if I don't close an escrow, I don't eat. Um, what is your opinion on using a lot of these different platforms? So I think your approach is very much sell the community before you sell the house, and it's enriching the perspective or the consumer on everything local. That sort of encompasses that home search process. Do you think, as a new agent and engaging in all these various different tools or utilizing all these very different tools, do you think they're hurting themselves by not taking a more aggressive sales approach, or do you think that it's helping them by establishing a better presence?
I think it's actually somewhere in the middle. Not to sound too democratic about that, but I think you actually have to focus somewhere and be really good at one thing. Certainly, if you're a new agent, I think there's a great tendency to to want to do everything. I think there's a lot of advice out there that advocates doing everything, which
but also a lot of
I disagree
misinformation
with.
on how to do everything.
Absolutely. Everybody's supposed to be on Facebook and Twitter and have a YouTube channel and be blogging 4 times a day and checking in and don't forget Google Plus and make sure you get your SEO and all this kind of stuff. And if you do all that, you actually don't have any time to work with clients.
That's true.
I think that can be a real problem. I guess, but the idea of picking one thing and doing that really, really well. That's the approach that we took at Corcoran. We never foresaw that we would have a YouTube channel when we started Twitter, but we wanted to solve a problem. We said, well, we have a customer service problem, and we picked a platform that was appropriate to that. So, we have new agents that start here at Corcoran, and we have sort of very similar conversations with them. And it might be that they want to initially start with email, for example. And I say, well, I want to share interesting stuff via like an email newsletter or something people can subscribe to, but I never really know what to post. So one of the things that we'll sort of steer them towards is using something like Flipboard or Zeit or some way of like aggregating great content to choose from. And that seems to resonate really well with them. But I think that there's a huge danger to want to do everything, and I think that can lead you to a bad place. Certainly in terms of working with clients versus building a presence, and you have to have voice. I think you need to have a unique digital voice. You have to be different from everybody else because there's so much noise that standing out is becoming increasingly difficult. So,
how do you think one establishes that without forcing it? A lot of people seem to force it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I from my perspective, I think the louder you try to be, the less you're actually heard. I think having some unique perspective on something, and something that we hear time and time again is that people have come to the real estate industry from elsewhere. They usually maybe like second or third career type people. They come from the music industry, or they've come from some other business sector. So they come with all these sort of unique stories, and if you can tie that to locations somehow, then I think you have sort of a unique play. I mean, we have agents at Corcoran that we were working with the other week, and it turns out he was like a championship ballroom dancer, and he had this amazing sort of history. And as we scratched away at that, it turns out that he was highly connected into that particular community here in the city.
Yeah.
And it turns out that that became his strategy. It was uniquely his, and I think the more agents can do that kind of thing, rather than trying to be everything to everybody,
right,
the better.
I like it.
Yeah, I mean, he was an amazing character, but when we first met with him, we had no idea what story he was going to come out with. It was amazing, but everybody has something like that, I think.
Now, here's one of the questions that I wanted to ask you early on, but because I know it was one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you on this call, was I'm looking at your Google Plus page now, and the byline reads, your title's obviously the Corcoran Group, and the byline reads, one amazing New York City photo, one amazing story, once every day. And you have this sort of beautiful landscape of one of the shots of New York. But talk to us a little bit about, why Google Plus, why the content you share, and how you see that sort of evolving moving forward.
Yeah, Google Plus is an interesting one for us. One of the things that we're very interested in is this idea of what we call moving from creative excellence to content excellence. And Google Plus is a very interesting play for us because the origin of these photos is actually in Foursquare. What we do when we're leaving venue tips around Manhattan and Brooklyn is that we will associate a photo with them. So if we make a recommendation for, the Shake Shack or go check out the windows at Bergdorf Goodman or something like that, we'll always put a picture with it as much as we possibly can, because tips that have photos with them get used more. More people add them to their to-do list.
There's more impact.
There's more impact inside of, basically a big long list of text. So that's why we do it. But as a result of taking all these high-definition photos around the city, what we ended up doing was creating a huge archive of photos of New York. So we actually house all of that on Flickr. And you can browse them by neighborhood and by topic, and they're all they have a lot of sort of keyword association with them and things like that. So they're generated inside of Foursquare and they're archived in Flickr. But we were really enjoying sort of what we were making there in our attempts to make everything kind of more visual. So when the opportunity to look at something like Google Plus came along, we actually took the same approach that we took from Twitter to Facebook. We said, why don't we do one thing really, really well, and we'll do a best of Flickr. That's what we'll do, and that will be our Google Plus play. One thing, once a day, and we'll associate a story with the photo. So we'll actually tell something interesting. So it's a little bit sort of it retains its roots as a Foursquare tip, if you like, because it shares something insightful and local. But it allows us to create a very simple product that, as Google Plus grows, we will grow with it. We didn't want to do anything too complicated too early, because Google Plus is 30 days old for businesses. People often forget, I think. The whole initiative is only, I think, 5 months old. So as the platform grows, what we actually think will happen is what happened with us in Foursquare, is that we'll start doing one thing very, very simply, and as the platform grows, our presence within it will grow as well. So that's sort of the genesis of why we wanted to start using Google Plus, but we actually think it's going to be very interesting in terms of the overall Google ecosystem, if you like. And I think it's actually a very, very different offering than Facebook. I think a lot of people think of Google Plus in terms of Facebook, and I think that that's misleading to do that. I think if you look at the culture of apps between the two services, for example, the amount of Google apps that you use throughout the day is vast, from Gmail to search to Android to YouTube to Reader to Maps. It touches you in so many different places. But what they lack is sort of the social aspect between those apps. But Facebook, it has that very, very strong social layer, but it doesn't really have apps on top of it. Like I mentioned before, like their video thing is terrible. And photos are very limited, and the ability to search within Facebook, despite the association with Bing, is still very, very poor. So one is sort of the opposite of the other. It's like Google has apps but no social, and Facebook has social but very few apps. So I think that what's actually going to happen is that something like Google Plus is going to be kind of the glue between all of the different Google experiences. And if you saw what they did with YouTube recently, where YouTube channels have gotten a makeover, if you like, you see the Google universe starting to kind of blend together a little bit, and it's all starting to look like Google Plus. And as you think, YouTube is actually a really, really interesting one that you can use a Google Plus Hangout to watch a YouTube clip with your friends, or as they move into more sort of proprietary content generation inside of YouTube, this idea of sort of social TV is going to be something that Google Plus is going to be right in the middle of. So I think for us that's a very interesting set of conversations, and a very, very interesting one for a brand to be part of.
Now, this is you mentioned Hangouts, so I wanted to ask you this question because I think you've been using Hangouts in an interesting way. And then my question that I've been asking you sort of as a theme on this call is what sort of conversations is this generating? You use Hangouts what, on a daily, weekly, or as time permits basis?
As time permits, honestly. We try to do it daily as much as possible. We never force it.
Right.
If I'm at my desk and available to chat, we like to open the door and people can say hi.
It's not like you're pushing. It's not like you're doing a big push that says promoting a Hangout at a typical time or something.
No, we never promote a Hangout, and we never invite people to hang out. We just put a public Hangout out there, and people that have us in their circles are able to. I guess I'm not really sure what you call it. You just go call in if you like. But for me, Hangouts, they're really great because they sort of fulfill the customer service promise that Twitter always really had. It's like I want to speak to like a real person, and Twitter does that to some extent, like it's a voice behind an account. But Hangouts it's you actually get the person, and you can see them, and you can interact with them, and you can share stuff with them, and you can watch stuff together, and
which adds a whole new level of connection.
It's an entirely new level that like Facebook and Twitter and even YouTube and Foursquare, they don't offer anything like this. So, for me, Hangouts are very, very I think important to what we're trying to do from a social media customer service perspective. And we've actually had a lot of fun with them. We've had people call in from Amsterdam last week, which was amazing.
That is awesome.
And we had somebody call in and then immediately hang up because they got freaked out that somebody was actually here. So as people sort of learn the platform, we're sort of learning along with them. And we've actually had some really, really interesting conversations. We've learned things that we never knew existed about Google Plus and implemented them back into our page. And it's just a way for people to kind of help each other. One of the interesting things that we found from a Hangout is if you click the profile icon of our page, for example, it actually turns into a slideshow, and you can actually generate sort of little stories inside of your Facebook, inside of your Google Plus profile icon. And we have a little slideshow of some of our favorite foods around the city, for example.
It's making me hungry. I'm clicking through them now.
but, as a unit that you could sort of click through and do stuff with, I never even knew that existed until somebody said, "Oh, you can click through."
That's fascinating, though.
But you could do, you could do something that had like a narrative. You could do, I could see our Foursquare tips being populated inside of there. Things like that. So we're learning things like that inside of Hangouts. So it's actually been. It's been a lot of fun,
So to wrap some of this up and some of the takeaways here, you're creating content on all these different platforms to really sort of immerse the consumer into everything that embodies, what it is to be in New York, what it is to live in New York. But you don't do a lot of cross-promotion, and we talked about a couple of the reasons why. You'll see amongst real estate agents as they use these tools, there is a lot of that heavy cross-promotion. Oh, I got to be on this network. Oh, I got to be on that network. What is your advice to those agents that are looking to embrace technology and a lot of the social platforms as far as how they approach that content creation process? If you have any sort of time management tips or best practices that you've learned just over the years doing some of these things yourself.
It's a good one. I mean, the best thing I could probably advocate is to be a ruthless editor. Be as ruthless as you possibly can with your editing, and only post things that you really believe are absolutely stellar, killer pieces of content.
And if they're not, don't post it.
And if they're not, don't post it. And you have to consider the recipient with these things. Even though you may think it's awesome or it may be interesting to you, when you're inside of a Facebook news feed or a Twitter a Twitter stream that's going so fast it's like a fire hose, your visibility of that content is almost exclusively based on how interesting it is. Whether from a visual perspective or from a uniqueness perspective or whatever it is. But that's really the best advice I can give from a content perspective is that it really has to be as good as you can possibly make it or don't post. And I think that's really an approach that served us well at Corcoran that I think a lot of agents don't do. I think there's a lot of contributing to the noise, whether it's just the minutia of sort of chit chat back and forth on Twitter that is really just meaningless, right through to open houses posted in Facebook. So don't give somebody a reason to hide or unfollow you. Make it as good as possible. That's really what
I like that. I like that. That's a tweetable line right there.
Well, that's good. So long as it's tweetable, right?
And then the last question for you, how would you advise a new agent to embrace all of this but really manage their time so that they are focusing on their core business, which is selling real estate and closing escrows?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have that's sort of that's the kernel of this stuff, is that you have to have perspective on your time management, I think. And I think there's a number of tools that can cut down a lot of your work. I mean, like I said before, I'm a big fan of services like Zeit and Flipboard, just for sort of managing the stream of what you could post. I think those kind of services are really great. Zeit I'm a big fan of just because it's curated by topic as opposed to source. And for example, like when I commute in and out of the city, I have a 45-minute commute into Manhattan every morning. I'm using that time on the train with my iPhone to curate and create all of the content that ultimately gets posted throughout the day. So, as I'm sort of a captive in the train, I'm able to use mobile technology to really source all this stuff and make the best use of my time. So I think mobile is a really, really big part of being able to facilitate that. And I think a lot of people still think of a lot of these things as sort of primarily sort of desktop experiences, Facebook and Twitter perhaps as well. And I think mobile really is a great way around that. So I do a tremendous amount of what we end up doing in social, and certainly in Foursquare as well, just directly on my iPhone. And
that's awesome.
Just focus on, just do one thing really, really well. Don't try to be all things to all people, because ultimately you'll do nothing well, I think, if you take that approach.
Awesome. Matthew, thank you for taking the time with us. Now, where can we find you on the web?
I am at facebook.com/the Corcoran Group. That's our page. You can reach out to me directly on our Google Plus page. I wish I had a vanity URL for you. It do not exist yet. But I'm sure if you just do a search for Corcoran or the Corcoran Group, you're easily able to find us. And if you want to chat direct, I'm on Twitter at Corcoran_group.
Awesome. Matthew, thanks again, and I will talk to you all soon.
Thank you so much, Ricardo.